Hello and welcome to part 2 of my autism diagnosis story. If you join me for part 1, we are going through all of the criteria that I discussed with the assessor when I went through my autism diagnosis process. Words are hard. And I actually compiled a notebook of these things after researching some of the diagnostic criteria and what to expect, because I don't go into anything without research. So in order to help you maybe prepare and see if some of these resonate with you, I am creating these videos in this series to detail the things that I received an autism diagnosis for. If we've not met before, my name is Heather. Thank you very much for joining me today. I am a late diagnosed autistic and ADHD human, and I create videos about my experiences and about autism and ADHD and what that looks like in adults with low support needs, such as myself. I don't like that term, but that's what it is. So today, in part 2 of the video, in part 1, we went over some specific categories that I had gathered information on, which were my sensory sensitivities and some of my childhood experiences. And if you didn't get a chance to watch that video, I will link it down below in the description of the video so that you can go check that out as well and see if any of those items resonate with you. And today I want to talk about the categories of repetitive behaviors that I provided, and some of my stims, and just some social misunderstandings and special interest topics. And then in the third and final video in this series, we will sit down and read my actual diagnosis paperwork that I received and kind of go through some of the information on that. So stay tuned for part 3. So in the first section I'm discussing today, we're talking about repetitive behaviors. Repetitive behaviors are definitely part of the autism diagnosis criteria, and again, they would need to be behaviors that you have done throughout your life, not something that just began or that coincides with some sort of issue that you're experiencing in your life. Normally, these behaviors are behaviors that you have had lifelong. And while those repetitive behaviors may change circumstantially, you have always exhibited some sort of repetitive behavior. For me, same food is a definite repetitive behavior. I have had trail mix for breakfast for decades. I really couldn't even tell you how long. Like, that is just, that's breakfast. That's what it's got to be. Doesn't necessarily matter the type of trail mix. I do have preferences, but I want a cup full of trail mix for breakfast. And if I don't have that, my day is just not right. My experience of the day will not be right for the rest of the day. And that is something that I definitely have to repeat. Crunchy foods. I love crunchy foods, again, with the trail mix, but the repetitive behavior of chewing something crunchy, that is a stim as well. I have internal echolalia or egolalia, which I will repeat things in my head instantly. I will repeat lines from movies, from songs, from shows. I will wake up with a song in my head, and it just, maybe even just the chorus of it will go on repeat all day long. I cannot hear people counting without singing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that tells you how old I am. If you know what that's from, then you're old too. So pacing, I repetitively pace. I walk in circles, typically when I'm talking on the phone. Anything like that, I'll have to walk around and move. I cannot talk without moving. So you see I'm moving my hands while we talk. I have to do that to maintain some sort of comfort level in my ability to speak. Flexing my hands and my feet. This is something I didn't realize that I did all the time until recently, but I do. And I actually have foot problems from it, and I get leg cramps and just horrible cramping because I am always tensing something. And I catch myself now more often, but it does lead to a lot of residual pain and chronic pain, because when you are constantly tight in one area or another, or all areas, you're going to have chronic pain. Touching my neck and my mouth when I am stressed or overwhelmed. If you see me in a video going like this, it is me trying to self-soothe. And that is a constant repetitive behavior, stroking my neck or touching my chest or things of that nature. I have an issue, and I don't know if I would consider this a repetitive behavior, but this is what I listed it under, of only doing things the way that I know how to do them. I have a huge issue with a third place solution, with seeing things outside of the realm of the normal. For instance, driving. I've lived in the same town the majority of my life. I know where everything is, and I know about 20 different ways to get there. But I will have to, one, visualize the route in my head before I'm going somewhere. I plot out exactly how I'm going to get there, and I didn't realize that I was so narrow in my ability to get places until I had to start using a GPS years ago, and it would tell me totally different ways that were often a lot less convoluted. But in my brain, I only knew how to get there by going X, Y, and Z, and maybe the GPS cut out X, and I didn't even need to go there first. I could have just cut across this way. So that's something that I definitely have issues with. This is just some notes that I've made under the repetitive portion, so I'll read you those before we go on to the stems. But coming to the realization of how much more difficult my life has been because I don't always understand instructions that I'm given, and I don't always think through or see what's needed for a task until I'm already doing it. And here is an example that I provided. I had to wear a heart monitor for a cardiologist for several weeks because I was being tested for passing out, POTS-like symptoms, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome systems. And when I returned for the results, they said that I'd made no indications during the test of any problems. Well, I didn't do that because when the nurse put the monitor on me, I asked, am I supposed to, when I feel like I'm having an episode, indicate that on the monitor, or indicate that some way so that you can compare what I'm feeling versus what you're seeing? And she said, no, you don't have to do that. It's going to catch any problems. Don't even worry about it. Just wear it and do as you would normally do. So, of course, I didn't make any indications that I had any issues, even though I did, because the instructions I was given at the beginning were to do this, and that I didn't need to do anything else. So I took that very literally. Another medical example would be when I had surgery to have my gallbladder out. The instructions that I were given were very plain. Do not bring anything with you at all. No phone, no identification, no wallet, no purse, no nothing. That you could not have any visitors with you throughout the process. And the day that I went in, I was very off-put. I had nothing. I had nothing. I had no purse, no phone, no nothing. And if that isn't enough to just throw you completely off the planet, because who goes anywhere without anything? The fact that I was passing out and having those kind of issues, and the concern that what if I pass out in the hospital and I have no identification and nobody knows who I am and I'm here by myself because you told me not to bring anybody with me, those were very big concerns for me. So I was incredibly upset and very dysregulated right off the bat when I got there for the surgery to the pre-op waiting room and saw that everyone else there for surgery had their phones and their bags and had someone with them, and even took someone with them back to the pre-op room where you had already been like prepped for surgery and had someone holding their hand. And here I am with nothing and no one because I followed the directions. Apparently those weren't real directions, or maybe everybody else didn't pay attention to those. So those are things I've always had issues with. Another example is I decided I wanted to, this was at this time, I had decided I wanted to weed the flower bed. And once I decided I'm going to do something, I just go do it. And I don't always necessarily take the steps that would set me up for a successful process of doing that. So I just went out and I'm bending over and I'm breaking my back and my knees are hurting and I'm trying to get stuff out of the ground. And then my husband finally goes, why don't you just use this stool? And here's some gloves and some tools. I wouldn't have thought of any of it. I really honestly wouldn't. I would have just kept going until I was ready to pass out and not have thought that, oh, there's probably an easier way for me to do this if I would just plan these things out first. So those are some examples of repetitive behaviors and real life examples of difficulty following instructions and maybe necessarily seeing the steps that I need to take before I go into doing something. The next section of information that I compiled were my stims, or things that I do physically or whatever. I broke them down in categories of senses. So I have visual stims. I love to color code everything. My closet, my work environment, everything I do is color coded in one aspect or another because it helps me to visually see where everything is, that it feels better that it's organized. It feels better that it's like put in a way that makes sense for me. And when that way is disrupted, it disrupts my thought processes. Visually, I love like little fairy lights, little tiny low lighting things throughout the house. And I do stare at them. And sometimes, and I didn't realize that not everybody could do this, but I relax my vision, so that it's kind of this bokeh, blurry, lighted visual, but apparently everybody cannot do that. I have a fear of climbing things visually, like if I see stairs that I need to climb, I have to mentally prepare myself. So not necessarily a fear of heights, just a fear of climbing things. I have a fear of water. This is not in regards to the fear of water, but water is something I'm actually drawn to as a visual stim, staring at bodies of water, the way the light reflects off the water, the shadows it makes, the sounds it makes, things like that. I have a pool, just a little kiddie pool in my backyard, but in the summer I will just sit on my porch and watch the way the water reflects onto the ceiling and just stare at it endlessly. Sounds, I mentioned this in the previous part, but repeating the same song over and over again, something that soothes me. Sometimes I will listen to the same sounds over and over again, but they're not necessarily songs with words. Oftentimes words in songs will throw me because they will remind me of something traumatic, or they'll bring up an experience that I'll feel in my body, and I don't really want to feel that, so I don't listen to a lot of music that is popular or has words anymore. I make comfy noises all the time. I don't know how else to describe it, and that's exactly what I wrote in here, but when I settle in on the couch, when I settle into bed, I'm always like, I'm always making little grunty noises that are probably not appropriate in public, but that doesn't mean that I don't do them. There's certain voices that I'm very drawn to. Like, I can listen to people just kind of talk, and I love listening to podcasts. I love listening to long YouTubes. I will set up my day listening to that. But there's certain voices, Alan Watts, Ram Dass, things like that. Like, I absolutely love British accents. I think that is also a thing, but I am just obsessed with people with British accents and Australian accents. So if that's you and you're watching this, I'm obsessed with you. I'll make up songs for everything. That's another way I'll verbally stim, is like, I'll just be doing an event. I'm like, okay, now we're going to the kitchen and we're going to make some cookies. So those are my verbal stims. Smell, scratch and sniff things as a child were life. My strawberry shortcake dolls were the best because their scent just never went away. Like, I don't even know what they used on these dolls to make them smell so good for so long, but I would just sit there with strawberry shortcake just going inhaling her for hours as a child because she smelled so good and so comforting. Some smells are just comfort smells. Chai or coffee, like a good warm coffee, holding that in my hands in the morning. I will just sit and smell it in the morning, and that is a sensory stim. Touch, I have to imagine what everything feels like. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes I'll touch things, or in my previous video, sometimes I'll touch things and they don't feel like what I thought they were going to feel like, and it's icky. And I cannot stand it. I cannot do it. The texture of certain things, I love different textures. I love the way things feel. Self-touch to self-soothe. As I mentioned earlier, I'll touch my chest, but that when I have a headache, I also have to rub my neck and my head and my forehead. I'll press on my eyes. I do like pressure in a lot of instances, and it does tend to bring me back to my body. I can't use things if they feel wrong. Pins, blankets, clothing, silverware, all kinds of things feel wrong. Either feel wrong in my hand, feel wrong on my body, feel wrong against my skin, and I just can't do it. Fingertips, I will repeatedly touch my fingertips to the edge of my nails. I'll do that all the time, or I'll run my nail. That's a very common sneaky stim that a lot of us who are high masking do. I'll do this like while I'm sitting in my lap. Nobody will see it. So it's a stim that not everybody knows that's what it is. Scrunching up the fingers and the toes. Scratching, because itchy is also a current status for me with the perimenopause, but always as well. So scratching things does bring relief sometimes. And I cannot stand to be barefoot. I cannot stand for my bare feet to touch anything. And but I also don't like socks, so it's a struggle. I will always be wearing sandals or flip-flops or something like that, but walking barefoot, even on a freshly clean floor, cannot do it, because if one morsel of dirt or sand or something touches my foot, I am jumping out of my skin. That's all there is to it. Taste, crave sweet and salty mixed stuff, crave crunchy things, and I love mixing textures. I am not one of those neurodivergent people that wants my food not to touch. I have to have a bite of everything. And then I have to make sure that my last bite is the perfect bite. So say you made macaroni and cheese to go with your chicken nuggets, super simple example, but like I will have to have a little bit of mac and cheese with every bite of nugget, and if I run out of one before the other, it just gets thrown away. The rest of it just gets thrown away because it's not going to get eaten without the coinciding thing that I need it with. My vestibular, swinging. I will sway back and forth. I love to swing on swings, bouncing, rocking, clapping. A lot of times I will clap to get myself motivated or snap myself out of something, so I'll clap. And it has been very off-putting to coworkers and other people when you just kind of randomly clap very loudly to make yourself focus. Being in water is a vestibular stim for me. I shower twice a day. I don't like feeling icky, but I also like feeling the sense of the water running down me. I love swimming. I love floating. Being in water, period. The feeling of being weightless is one of the best feelings I think I can have personally. Dancing to no music. I'll dance all the time. But then again, there probably is music because I'm making up stupid little songs in my head all the time. Whole body stretching or flexing. Before I get up out of bed, I have to stretch my feet, stretch my arms, stretch my legs like a cat. Before I sit down, I'm moving like a cat. So being a yoga teacher actually kind of helps because I can just be like, oh, I'm just doing yoga. But no, really, I'm stimming because I've been sitting and now my muscles are, and they want me to move. and mental stems, repeating music lyrics, TV, things like that. Um, I will say something and it gets stuck in my head as a stem, and I can't dictate when it stops or when it goes away. The example that I gave, um, when I get up in the morning, our dog sleeps in a kennel next to the bed, and usually he's fine when I get up because I get up hours before my husband does. And one morning he had said, "I'll be up in a little bit." And then the dog just started going nuts because he talked, and I just said, "Don't speak." And then for the rest of the day, I had that song, Gwen Stefani, in my head going, "Don't speak," over and over again for probably a solid 24 hours. So those are just a few of some of the sensory stems that I have. And then just a few other things that I listed about social misunderstandings that I have had because, again, an inability to successfully socially communicate and work with others is a main criteria of an autism diagnosis. So I completed yoga teacher training a year or so ago, and it was a 6-month class. I was in the class every couple of weeks for an entire day and felt a little outsidery in the class when I was much older than the other ladies who were there. They were all in health fields already. I was not. So I didn't really know how to take it when I realized that everybody was kind of forming friendships throughout the course of the class. I would hear them talk about going to classes somewhere together, or that they had gotten together to work on a routine and practice. And I felt a little odd. I was like, oh, well, nobody's invited me to do these things. And I wonder, okay, well, maybe they just all get along really great. And I'm just the weirdo. So it wasn't an uncommon experience. Wasn't something I really was too upset about, but it did kind of hurt my feelings a little bit. And it wasn't until the last day of the 6-month class that I realized that everyone had been involved in a chat group on GroupMe that I was told at the onset of class was not going to be used. So I never even installed it. But everybody else had, and it actually did get used, and this is how they were all communicating. But because I didn't understand or know how to just go, hey, how are you guys all getting together? Or, how can I get in on this? Or, you know what I mean? I just kind of sat back and watched it happen and was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm just not part of that friend group. So that's something, that's a current social example that I was able to give. I have been in the past easily manipulated because I am a people pleaser and I don't want to ever make anybody sad or let anybody down. A doormat in social situations, things like that. So I also misinterpret text messages a lot, things in writing, because without having that visual backup of, oh, this is how the tone is coming across, or this is how it sounds when they're saying it, or this is the face that they're making when they're saying it, or the way they're holding their body, and not having those things to be able to interpret what's being said has really messed me up in the past. And because of my poor negative self-concept, I often assume the worst versus just taking things that may be a neutral example as neutral. So thank you for joining me for part 2 of the diagnostic criteria that I presented at my autism assessment. Again, these are just some of the examples that I was able to come up with once I knew that I had the appointment scheduled and doing some research on what the diagnostic criteria for autism is. I tried to find examples throughout my life that would meet with those criteria. And even then, I was still a little thrown by the process, even with all the research I had done and watching other people's stories of their diagnosis. That was something I actually said to the doctor. I said, well, this is just not quite what I expected. And she's like, did you have an expectation? I was like, yeah, I kind of prepared for this in my head. And she said, do you do that often? I'm like, yes, for everything important. I prepare for it in my head, every conversation, even the videos that I make like this, I'm preparing for them in my head. So apparently that is another part of autism. But these were just some of the things that I was able to present to her, along with the criteria, the questions, and the things that she asked me about that helped facilitate my diagnosis. And as I mentioned in the last video, the doctor did say that it was the easiest diagnosis she's ever had to make in 15 years, and I wasn't quite sure how to take that. But we're taking it as a good thing, as I compiled great information and provided a pretty clear picture of my autistic profile to the doctor. So I hope that this video, as well as the first video in this series, were helpful to you. If they were, please give me a like, a comment, a subscribe, follow along, because in part 3, I am going to sit down with you and read you go over my autism diagnosis, the actual diagnosis paperwork that I received. So you can see what that says and what the doctor thought about all the information that I provided to her. So again, I appreciate you hanging out. I appreciate your input. And if any of this resonated with you, if any of the examples that I cited, if you see some of yourself in that, let me know in the comments. And let me know if these types of things would raise questions in you as to whether or not you should pursue a diagnosis, or if you already have a diagnosis, if those are things that maybe you considered when you were pursuing that diagnostic process. So thank you for listening. I appreciate you as always, and love you. Bye.